What can you not say about Toy Story? The series is such a big part of a lot of people's childhoods. It started in 1995 and has been able to do what seemed to be the impossible by making sequels that continue to be highly praised by critics and audiences alike. The third movie seemed like the perfect ending that could only be tarnished by another sequel, since it capped off the relationship built between the toys and Andy. The first Toy Story was a big deal at the time since it was the first computer-animated feature-length film. Unlike Avatar, it wasn't only praised by the tech behind it, but also for its emotional and well-written story and characters. It built one of the best friendships in movie history and also gave us an interesting look on how mistreated toys existed in this universe. Sid was such a good villain to start out the series, and I love how his room had this fun horror vibe to it. It really made an impression on me as a kid. You also can't overlook the genius of the Pizza Planet scenes and the alien's view of the claw.
I have been chosen. Farewell, my friends. I go on to a better place.
Such a clever idea. Toy Story 2, in my opinion, improved on the first movie, which is crazy because it was originally supposed to be a direct-to-DVD sequel until Pixar decided that it was way too good to let it slide under the radar. It continued to dive deeper into the themes of the franchise and had the toys exploring even more cool locations. The scenes where the toys go to Al's toy barn is especially hilarious. The Prospector and Al were great villains. Jesse's origin story is probably one of the most heart-wrenching scenes in a Pixar movie, and to see Buzz finally battle Zurg was so sick.
Surrender, Buzz Lightyear. I have won.
I'll never give in. You killed my father.
No, Buzz. I am your father.
Oh, and Rex's side arc of trying to figure out how to defeat Zurg in the Buzz Lightyear video game and finally beating him in real life just made the scene even better.
I did it. I finally defeated Zurg! Father.
The amount of locations in this movie just made the adventure feel more grand. Woody especially gets a lot of development in this movie, which just continues to make him the most layered character in the series. Kinda like how Iron Man was the heart of the MCU, this movie cemented Woody as the heart of the Toy Story movies. Toy Story 3 wasn't as good as the last movie in my opinion, but was still an impactful entry to the series. The first scene in Andy's imagination was probably the best opener to a Toy Story movie yet, and having the classic theme play afterwards with a sudden cut to black was a great way to foreshadow this movie's heartbreaking ending. Seeing Andy grown up and not having any interest in his toys anymore was the perfect way to continue the story, especially now that all the kids who watched the first two movies grew up by the time of this movie's 2010 release. The daycare was another interesting toy-centric location that hadn't been touched yet, and to have it be this dangerous and secretly corrupt prison run by a dictator was a really cool idea. Lotso Bear is probably my favorite Toy Story villain so far. Like all good characters in this universe, he has a sad backstory, but I also like him because he's the type of toy you'd never expect to be a villain. He's also fucking ruthless.
Push it! Push it! Where's your kid now, Sheriff?
Damn. But anyway, the movie leads up to that incinerator scene, followed by Andy finally giving away his toys. Both scenes made audiences around the world emotional in the most intense ways. The incinerator scene was actually the scene that got me into movie reviewing in the first place. This was the first movie I ever looked up online reviews for because I was curious to see if people reacted to it the same way I did. This was the first time I realized that movies could do more than just be mindless entertainment, which is why I mainly evaluate movies now based on how they affect me emotionally. If I don't feel anything while watching something, it probably won't be that memorable for me. But anyway, it's insane how well made this conclusion was to the series, because usually the third movie is where franchises begin to either get stale or take risks that don't pay off. Which begs the question, how the hell can there be a Toy Story 4? Leading up to the release, even before a trailer was shown, fans, including me, were scared that this one might be the one that ruins the series' perfect streak. Well, what the writers have done here is expand on the one loose end from the previous films, which was the disappearance of Woody's love interest, Bo Peep. She was never a major character, and her relationship with Woody always felt like an afterthought. But in the movie, they actually made her one of the coolest characters in the series. I'm happy to say that the new characters in general were all scene stealers, honestly. The two plush toys voiced by Key and Peele probably had one of, if not the best scene in the movie, not to mention Forky and Keanu Reeves' Do Kaboom were great as well and added a lot of heart to the film. It honestly made me wish that they were a part of the older movies. People are saying that this is the funniest Toy Story, and I think I'd have to agree with that. My main fear going into this movie was that this installment was going to feel like a very unsubstantial adventure, similar to the shorts that were released following the characters' adventures after Toy Story 3. I thought it was going to be a good ride, but somewhat disposable. Unfortunately, at times it did feel that way, but luckily this movie's third act made it all worth it in the end. pulling on my heartstrings just like the first 3 movies did. Even though most of the movie feels smaller in scope than the previous films, since it's so detached from the main saga, the new characters do a great job of making the entire adventure incredibly fun to watch. The villain was also surprisingly interesting and had the same horror vibe that reminded me of the scenes with Sid's toys from the first movie. This movie is definitely my least favorite of the series, but that's not to say it's bad. It's actually really good. It feels more like an epilogue if anything. My only flaw with the movie is that I wish the older characters were more involved, but then again, they had to be pushed back in order to let the new blood shine. Buzz gets in on the adventure more than the others, but I wish there were more scenes with him and Woody, even though I get that Woody and Bo's relationship was more important to the story here. So in the end, I'm gonna give Toy Story 4 an 8.5 out of 10. The movie wasn't so good that I feel like it needed to be made, but its strong emotional ending and great new additions to the Toy Story cast made for a charming epilogue to the final chapter of the series. I think it'll fare much better on rewatch once you know how certain characters' arcs go, and I'm really interested to see how people rank it down the line. I hope Pixar finally puts the series to rest and continues to work on more original movies, which seems to be the case with Onward and the recently announced Soul. I think their sequel work is done since most of their major franchises have gotten follow-ups. So yeah, thanks for watching, and next review will probably be